Hi there friends, thank you so much for taking the time to watch this video in which I want to share some really important news for us about the leadership of Everyday Church. During lockdown we played a game called the Trust Game in the Moore household. You may well have played it yourself. It's that game where you stand on a chair, you turn around, you face the wall so you can't see what's behind you, and you literally fall backwards trusting that the person you know and love who's behind you is going to catch you and everything's going to be okay. We did it in our house as part of our Everyday Kids during lockdown, where we were teaching our younger kids that, hey, this is how relationships formed. You trust one another and you trust that someone's going to be there for you. But more than that, this is how we build our relationship with God. God speaks to us, and when he speaks to us, we take radical steps to obey. And when we do that, we find just how faithful God is, and we grow in our relationship with him. We've been talking that kind of theme throughout lockdown with our children, without realizing that in the final weeks of lockdown, God was really going to call us to put our money where our mouth was. Ruth and I, we have felt God speaking to us about handing over the leadership of Everyday Church to someone else on the team. And we've had to kind of go through our own version of the trust game as we've grappled with that sense and as we've followed through on what we felt God's been saying to us. This is not a decision that we've been considering for the whole of lockdown. To be honest, we've spent the 18 months of lockdown so busy trying to pastor you and the other people at Everyday Church that we haven't had that much time even to consider our own future. I think in January, we began wondering, as most pastors have, as the clutch went down for lockdown, and as church life stopped for 18 months, at least church life as we knew it, well, as the clutch comes back up, are we the right people to be leading the church into the new season? We had some conversations around that in January particularly, but then it went on the back burner. We were busy trying to pastor the church through this season. But you'll remember at the end of July, and I was preparing the sermon at the beginning of July, we preached on Acts 8, 25 to 27, where Philip is in Samaria in the midst of a great work in an amazing church when God speaks to him. And it says in Acts 8, 25 to 27 that God spoke to him and said, go south to the desert road. And he went and he met a chariot and he met the Ethiopian, and the rest is church history. I was preparing a sermon on that, and suddenly some of these conversations we'd had in January came flooding back. And Ruth and I began to ask some questions about, okay, what's going to happen to Everyday Church at the end of lockdown, this season we're now in? I started asking myself, I've led Everyday Church for 11 years. Do I feel as much vision for the next 11 years as I did for the first 11 years? And weirdly, strangely, surprisingly, I actually felt in God the answer was no. I asked the second question, am I the only person on the team that could lead Everyday Church into being post-lockdown church? Could I lead the church forward? Am I the only person who could lead the church forward to be joyful and faith-filled and united for the future? Again, surprisingly, really came to the conclusion that the answer was no. So this takes us to mid-July, still quite recent. And Ruth and I, we'd initiated this conversation together. We were praying about it with God, but we hadn't shared with anybody else. So immediately mid-July, we began talking with the leaders of Everyday Church, some of the elders, some of the trustees, and also with Dave Holden and Jonathan Latok, who oversee Everyday Church as part of the New Ground family of churches. And they were actually quite positive about this. They said, well, this is a big moment for Everyday Church. There is no point in you leading the church for a couple of months back into post-lockdown church and then having this conversation. If you're feeling this, then let's talk about it now and let's make some speedy decisions by faith together. So like every other church in this season, we've come to the conclusion as elders and as trustees, we need to move forward into being post-lockdown church with faith, unity, excitement, vision. There is just no point, if Ruth and I are feeling this, of us saying, well, let's give it a term, we'll get a bit more momentum, and then suddenly we'll upend everything by changing. If this change is going to happen, it really needs to happen straight away. And so we've come to the decision that from the 1st of September, Simon Elliott is going to lead Everyday Church. He'll lead initially as the interim leader, because there's like a process for us to take in terms of, as a church, deciding on a new lead elder. But he's definitely my recommendation. I think he is the man that God is calling to lead Everyday Church forward into this new season. Ruth and I aren't quite sure what it's going to look like for us. We know that it won't be at Everyday Church. We know that from September onwards, God's calling us to go south to the desert road. It's not a complete blank sheet of paper. I'm leading the New Ground Academy in the autumn term. I'm going to finish the Straight to the Heart series of commentaries that I've been writing for the last 12 years. I've only got 2 books left to write. I'm going to write them both before Christmas, finish that commentary series, which seems to be blessing a lot of people. So I'm going to be busy, but I'm not going to be at Everyday Church. I'm going to be kind of seeking God on this desert road. Okay, God, what's the next chapter look like for Ruth and my life, for our children? Where are you calling us to be in terms of life and ministry and fruitfulness? And in the meantime, Everyday Church is going to power forward under a new leadership team. It's big news, and if you feel sad as I'm sharing, please understand, Ruth and I feel your sadness, maybe even more so. We wish that we had more time actually to process this together, because we want to say goodbye to many of you personally rather than doing it via this video. At the same time, we do recognize we are living through exceptional times because of coronavirus and the timing of the lifting of lockdown and the desire that every church has to hit the ground running from the start of September. We get that it's important we share the news via this video, and then we'll try and say as many personal goodbyes as possible. But we do share your sadness, and we look forward to having an opportunity to share some of that with you. We feel a mixture of faith. We do believe God's really called us. We feel deep peace that God's in this, and even though it's quite frightening for Ruth and me and our kids to go south to the desert road, we are totally convinced God's in this, and we do feel the peace of God in it. But we also feel a bit afraid. We also feel a bit of trepidation. We probably feel like Philip did in Acts 8, just unsure what the future holds for us. So we really appreciate your prayers for us in this season. And we're going to be praying for you as a church in this season too. We've always said that the senior pastor of Everyday Church is not Phil Moore, it's Jesus Christ. In a sense, we as a church all together have an opportunity to play the trust game together now. This is the moment where God's calling us as a church to put our money where our mouth is. It was our confidence in Phil and Ruth? Of course it wasn't. But sometimes in these seasons you realise just how much you can put your faith and confidence in a person. No, we've got a great team. We've got a great vision. Most of all, we've got a great God and Saviour, who is the true senior pastor of Everyday Church, who's the one who's truly led us these past 11, 12 years, and the one who is truly going to lead us forward out of lockdown and into the glories of being post-lockdown church together. I really hope that I'm going to have an opportunity, and that Ruth will too, to catch up with many of you personally. But because of the nature of this season, the fact we're scattered, there's holidays, and people still, not everybody's gathered back to church yet because of COVID, we wanted at least to share the news in this video. And we trust that you will trust God with us. And we trust that as Ruth and I lean backwards into his arms, and as we as a church lean backwards into his arms, we trust that he's going to catch us, and we're going to look back on this season and we're going to say, we didn't see that one coming, but boy, was God in that. So thank you for everything. I really do feel such appreciation and love towards you, the congregation of Everyday Church. And I really feel faith that when we say yes to God, it always works for our best and for his glory. Hopefully I'll see you soon. God bless you.